The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty training grounds of Camp Ironstone, one of the military's most demanding boot camps. Recruits stumbled out of their barracks, bleary-eyed and struggling to adjust their ill-fitting uniforms. Among them walked a slight figure who seemed almost lost in the oversized camouflage gear that hung loosely from her small frame. Maya Chen moved quietly through the crowd of mostly male recruits, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun that somehow still managed to look too neat, too careful. At barely 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighing no more than 110 pounds, she stood out like a sparrow among hawks. Her delicate features and soft-spoken manner had already earned her sideways glances and whispered comments from her fellow recruits during the previous day's orientation. "Look at that," muttered Jake Morrison, a broad-shouldered recruit from Texas who had quickly established himself as the unofficial leader of the more vocal group. "What's a little girl like that doing here? This isn't summer camp." His comment drew snickers from the cluster of recruits around him, all of whom seemed to tower over Maya's diminutive form. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from the training facility, his weathered face stern and unforgiving. His voice boomed across the assembly area as he called the recruits to attention. "Listen up, maggots. Today we start separating the soldiers from the wannabes. Some of you think you're tough because you played high school football or got into a few bar fights. You're about to learn what real toughness means." As the recruits lined up for their first physical training session, Maya found herself surrounded by men who seemed to view her presence as either a joke or an insult. The whispers followed her as she took her position at the back of the formation, hoping to blend into the background. $20 says she's crying by lunch," whispered Tommy Chen, no relation despite the shared surname, a stocky recruit from New York who had been making crude jokes since arrival. "Another 20 says she quits by the end of the week." "You're on," replied Marcus Davis, a former college athlete who had enlisted after a knee injury ended his football dreams. "Though honestly, I give her until tomorrow morning. First night sleeping on these cots and eating mess hall food, she'll be calling Daddy to come pick her up." The morning began with a 5-mile run around the base perimeter. Maya had always been a runner, finding peace in the rhythmic pounding of her feet against pavement during early morning jogs through her hometown. But this was different. The pace was punishing, the terrain unforgiving, and the weight of disapproving stares seemed to slow her down more than any physical challenge. She fell behind within the first mile, her shorter legs working twice as hard to keep up with the longer strides of her fellow recruits. The pack ahead of her gradually pulled away, and she could hear their voices carrying back on the wind, discussing her obvious inadequacy for military service. "What did I tell you?" Jake called over his shoulder to his running partners. "She's already falling back. This is embarrassing. They're letting anyone in these days." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez ran alongside the group, his experienced eyes taking in everything. He had seen thousands of recruits pass through these gates over his 15-year career, and he had learned to spot the ones who would make it and the ones who wouldn't within the first few days. The small Asian woman struggling at the back of the pack seemed like an obvious washout, but something about her determined expression caught his attention. When they finally completed the run, Maya was nearly 10 minutes behind the main group. Her face was flushed red, sweat soaked through her uniform, and her breathing was labored. But she had finished. While several larger, apparently more athletic recruits had dropped out along the way, complaining of cramps or heat exhaustion, Maya had pushed through to the end. Well, jeered Morrison as Maya finally jogged into the assembly area. "Look who decided to join us. Did you get lost out there, princess? Maybe take a wrong turn and stop for a manicure?" The laughter that followed was cruel and pointed. Maya kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing any emotional response. She had dealt with bullies before, though never in such an isolated and intense environment. The rest of the morning was filled with orientation sessions, equipment distribution, and basic military protocol instruction. Maya noticed that whenever she raised her hand to ask a question, which was rare, the other recruits would exchange glances and barely suppressed smiles. When she struggled to properly shoulder her assigned rifle due to its size relative to her small frame, the comments became more direct. "Hey Sergeant," called out Davis during weapons familiarization, "shouldn't there be special equipment for the kids? Maybe a toy gun or something more her size?" Even some of the drill instructors seemed to share the recruits' skepticism about Maya's presence. Corporal Williams, a younger instructor who clearly enjoyed the power his position gave him, made several pointed comments about physical standards and realistic expectations while looking directly at her. During the lunch break, Maya sat alone at a corner table in the mess hall, mechanically eating the bland military rations while trying to block out the conversations happening around her. The food was terrible, as advertised, but she had grown up eating simple meals and wasn't particularly bothered by the lack of flavor or appeal. "I heard her dad is some big-shot politician," she overheard Morrison saying to his growing circle of followers. "Probably pulled strings to get her in here for publicity photos. Make the military look all-inclusive and diverse before she quietly transfers out to some cushy desk job." "That would make sense," agreed Tommy. "No way she got in here on merit. Look at her. A strong wind would blow her away. How's she supposed to carry a wounded soldier or handle combat equipment?" Maya's chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. The assumption that she was here because of connections or political correctness stung more than the comments about her physical appearance. She had earned her place here through academic excellence, leadership positions in college, and a burning desire to serve her country that had been growing since her childhood. The afternoon brought their first taste of military obstacle course training. Maya watched as her fellow recruits attacked the various challenges with varying degrees of success. The rope climb proved particularly difficult for many of the larger men, whose bulk worked against them as they struggled to pull themselves up using only arm strength. When her turn came, Maya approached the rope with quiet determination. Her small size, which had been such a disadvantage during the morning run, suddenly became an asset. She had been climbing trees and playground equipment since childhood, and her light weight meant she needed less strength to pull herself upward. She scaled the rope quickly and efficiently, reaching the top faster than most of the recruits who had gone before her. For a moment, there was surprised silence from the watching group. "Lucky break," Morrison muttered, but his tone had lost some of its earlier confidence. The wall climb presented another challenge where Maya's size worked in her favor. While larger recruits struggled to pull their bulk over the 8-foot barrier, Maya was able to use technique and leverage to compensate for her lack of raw strength. She completed the obstacle on her first attempt, while several others needed multiple tries. But it was the crawling section that really surprised everyone. The course required recruits to army crawl under a series of low barriers while carrying their full pack and rifle. Maya's small frame allowed her to move through the confined space much more easily than her larger counterparts, many of whom got stuck or had to struggle awkwardly through openings that barely accommodated their shoulders. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez watched these developments with growing interest. He had seen plenty of recruits who looked impressive on paper but crumbled under pressure, and others who seemed unlikely to succeed but possessed hidden reserves of determination and skill. As the day wore on, Maya began to find her rhythm. The initial shock of the military environment was wearing off, and her natural competitiveness was beginning to emerge. She had always been driven to excel, whether in academics, athletics, or any other challenge she encountered. During evening inspection, Corporal Williams found fault with Maya's bunk preparation, claiming the corners weren't tight enough and the footlocker wasn't properly organized. While he delivered this criticism, several recruits watched with obvious satisfaction, enjoying her public humiliation. "Maybe military precision isn't for everyone," Williams said loudly enough for the entire barracks to hear. "Some people are better suited for gentler environments." Maya accepted the criticism without argument and immediately began correcting the deficiencies. She had learned long ago that arguing with authority figures only made situations worse, and she was determined not to give anyone additional ammunition to use against her. That night, as the lights went out and the barracks settled into an uneasy quiet, Maya lay on her narrow cot staring at the ceiling. Around her, she could hear whispered conversations and occasional laughter that she suspected was directed at her expense. The physical exhaustion from the day's training was nothing compared to the emotional drain of constant scrutiny and criticism. But giving up wasn't an option. Maya had grown up as the daughter of immigrants who had sacrificed everything to build a better life in America. Her parents had instilled in her a deep appreciation for the opportunities this country provided and a strong sense of duty to give back. Military service wasn't just a career choice for her, it was a calling. She thought about her grandfather, who had served in the Chinese military before immigrating to America in search of freedom and opportunity. He had told her stories of perseverance in the face of impossible odds, of finding strength when everyone around you believes you have none. The next morning brought a new set of challenges and a continuation of the hostile environment Maya had begun to navigate. During physical training, she pushed herself harder than ever, determined to prove that her presence wasn't a mistake. Her times were improving, and she was beginning to understand the rhythm and expectations of military training. But the social isolation continued. Mealtimes were particularly difficult, as she often found herself eating alone while listening to conversations that frequently centered around speculation about when she would finally give up and leave. "I bet her family is already getting calls," Davis said during breakfast, speaking just loudly enough for Maya to hear. "Probably asking when they can expect her home. This whole thing is just embarrassing for everyone involved." Maya had learned to tune out most of the comments, but some still penetrated her defenses. She was beginning to understand that her fellow recruits saw her not just as inadequate but as a symbol of what they perceived as declining military standards. To them, her presence represented political correctness gone too far, standards being lowered to accommodate people who had no business being there. During weapons training, Maya struggled initially with the weight and recoil of the standard-issue rifle. Her marksmanship was poor, and she could see the instructors exchanging meaningful glances each time she missed the target. The other recruits didn't bother hiding their amusement at her difficulties. "Maybe we should get her a slingshot instead," suggested Tommy after watching Maya's third consecutive miss during target practice. "Might be more her speed." But Maya was a quick learner, and she began to understand that success with the rifle wasn't just about strength but about technique, breathing control, and mental focus. She spent extra time studying the manual and practicing her stance during breaks, determined to master this critical skill. The breakthrough came during her fourth day of weapons training. Something clicked as she aligned the sights, controlled her breathing, and gently squeezed the trigger. The shot hit the center ring, and the next 4 shots grouped tightly around it. Suddenly, the laughter from her fellow recruits died away. "Beginner's luck," Morrison said dismissively, but his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Maya's improvement continued throughout the week. Her running time steadily decreased, her obstacle course performance became more consistent, and her weapons scores improved dramatically. More importantly, she was beginning to understand the unspoken rules and expectations of military life. She learned when to speak and when to remain silent, how to anticipate what the instructors wanted, and how to perform her duties with the precision and attention to detail that the military demanded. Her background in competitive academics had taught her how to analyze complex systems and identify the keys to success. But, perhaps most significantly, Maya was beginning to develop a quiet confidence that hadn't been there when she first arrived. Each challenge she met, each obstacle she overcame, added to her growing belief that she belonged here. The constant criticism and mockery were becoming background noise rather than devastating attacks on her self-worth. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had been watching these developments with professional interest. He had seen many recruits transform during their time at Bootcamp, but Maya's evolution was particularly notable. The scared, uncertain young woman who had arrived a week earlier was being replaced by someone who moved with purpose and determination. During a particularly challenging training exercise involving simulated combat scenarios, Maya surprised everyone, including herself. The exercise required teams of recruits to navigate a complex course while under simulated enemy fire, complete various tactical objectives, and demonstrate both individual skills and team cooperation. Maya's team was initially skeptical about her ability to contribute meaningfully to the mission. Morrison, who had been appointed team leader, made it clear that he expected her to stay back and try not to slow everyone else down. But, when their planned approach to one of the objectives failed and the team found themselves pinned down by simulated enemy fire, Maya's quick thinking saved the mission. She identified an alternative route that took advantage of her small size and agility, allowing her to flank the enemy position and create a distraction that enabled her team to advance. The success was noted by the observing instructors, though the other members of her team were reluctant to acknowledge her contribution. Morrison took credit for the tactical innovation, while the others seemed to treat it as a lucky accident rather than a demonstration of Maya's growing military skills. 2 weeks into boot camp, the dynamics at Camp Ironstone had settled into a predictable routine of grueling physical challenges, intensive classroom instruction, and relentless psychological pressure designed to break down civilian habits and build military discipline. Maya had found her footing in this harsh environment, though the social isolation and constant skepticism from her peers remained a daily challenge. The morning reveille echoed across the base at precisely 0500 hours, and Maya was already awake, having learned to rise a few minutes early to avoid the chaos of 30 recruits trying to use limited bathroom facilities simultaneously. She moved quietly through her morning routine, preparing for another day of proving herself worthy of the uniform she wore. During the past week, her performance had continued to improve steadily. Her 5-mile run time had dropped to just under 35 minutes, placing her in the middle of the pack rather than trailing far behind. More significantly, her weapons proficiency scores had climbed into the expert range, a development that had not gone unnoticed by the training staff. Chen called Staff Sergeant Rodriguez as the recruits assembled for morning formation. "Report to the range officer after morning PT. You've been selected for advanced marksmanship evaluation." The announcement sent ripples of surprise and resentment through the formation. Advanced marksmanship evaluation was typically reserved for recruits who showed exceptional promise, often those being considered for specialized training programs or elite units. Morrison's jaw tightened visibly at the news. "Probably just checking to make sure she's not cheating somehow," he muttered to Davis, though his voice carried far enough for Maya to hear. No way someone that small has suddenly become Annie Oakley. The morning physical training session was particularly brutal, featuring a new obstacle course that tested not just physical ability but mental toughness and problem-solving skills under pressure. Maya approached each challenge methodically, using her growing understanding of military tactics and her natural analytical skills to find efficient solutions. At the rope traverse, a 40-foot horizontal rope suspended 15 feet above a mud pit, Maya watched several larger recruits struggle with the technique. They attempted to muscle their way across using brute force, burning out their arms halfway through and dropping into the muddy water below. When her turn came, Maya wrapped her legs around the rope properly and used a hand-over-hand technique that distributed the effort across her entire body. She moved steadily and efficiently across the obstacle, reaching the other side without the dramatic struggle that had characterized most of the previous attempts. "Show off," Tommy muttered as Maya dropped lightly to the ground on the far side. But there was less conviction in his voice than there had been in previous weeks. The most challenging obstacle was a simulated building assault that required recruits to climb a 15-foot wall, navigate through a window, and clear a room using proper tactical procedures. Most recruits were struggling with the wall climb itself, which required significant upper body strength and coordination. Maya studied the obstacle carefully, noting handholds and potential leverage points that the larger recruits were overlooking. When her turn arrived, she approached the wall at an angle rather than straight on, using her smaller size to her advantage as she worked her way up using a series of small holds that wouldn't support heavier recruits. Once at the top, she moved through the window smoothly and executed the room-clearing procedure with textbook precision. Her movements were economical and purposeful, reflecting hours of studying the manual and practicing the techniques during her free time. Corporal Williams, who had been one of Maya's harshest critics, watched her performance with obvious surprise. "Chen," he called as she completed the obstacle. "Where did you learn room-clearing procedures?" "From the manual, Corporal," Maya replied simply. "I've been studying the tactical sections during evening free time." Williams nodded slowly, a gesture that might have been grudging respect. Maya had discovered that while many of her fellow recruits relied primarily on their physical abilities and natural athleticism, her academic approach to learning military skills was beginning to pay dividends. Following the morning training, Maya reported to the rifle range for her advanced marksmanship evaluation. Master Sergeant Patricia Stone, the range safety officer, was a 20-year veteran known for her exacting standards and no-nonsense approach to weapons training. "Chen," Stone said without preamble, "your scores have improved dramatically over the past 2 weeks. That kind of rapid improvement usually indicates either exceptional natural talent or extensive prior training." "Which is it?" "Neither, Master Sergeant," Maya replied honestly. I had never fired a weapon before arriving here. But I've been studying ballistics and breathing techniques from the advanced manuals and practicing my stance during breaks. Stone raised an eyebrow. You've been reading ballistics texts for fun? Yes, Master Sergeant. I find the physics interesting, and understanding the science helps me make better shots. Over the next 2 hours, Stone put Maya through a comprehensive evaluation that went far beyond basic marksmanship. She tested Maya's ability to engage targets at various distances, under different conditions, and with multiple weapon systems. The results were impressive by any standard, but particularly remarkable for someone with no prior firearms experience. 96% accuracy at 300 meters, Stone noted as she reviewed the final scores. 98% at 100 meters. These are scores I'd expect from a veteran marksman, not a recruit in her third week of basic training. Maya felt a flush of pride at the recognition, but she kept her expression neutral. She had learned that showing too much satisfaction with her achievements only increased the resentment from her fellow recruits. I'm recommending you for the base marksmanship competition next month, Stone continued. It's usually restricted to advanced trainees and instructors, but your scores justify an exception. The news of Maya's selection for the marksmanship competition spread quickly through the recruit population, generating a mixture of disbelief, resentment, and grudging acknowledgement that perhaps she possessed at least one military skill at an elite level. It's just shooting, Morrison declared during the evening meal, his voice carrying the defensive tone of someone whose own marksmanship scores were barely at the passing level. Anyone can point and pull a trigger. Let's see her carry a wounded soldier or handle real combat stress. But cracks were beginning to show in the unified front of skepticism that had greeted Maya's arrival. Some recruits were starting to acknowledge that her improvements were real and significant, even if they weren't ready to fully accept her as an equal. During tactical training exercises, Maya's analytical approach to problem solving was becoming increasingly valuable to her assigned teams. While other recruits might rush into situations relying on aggressive instincts, Maya would study the scenario carefully and identify weaknesses in enemy positions or more efficient approaches to objectives. In one particularly complex exercise involving a simulated hostage rescue, Maya's team was initially assigned to provide perimeter security while the supposedly more capable teams handled the actual assault. But, when both assault teams failed to complete the mission within the allotted time, the exercise controller decided to give Maya's team a chance. Morrison, still functioning as an informal leader among the more vocal critics, protested the decision. Sir, with respect, our team hasn't trained for this type of mission. We don't have the experience. Captain Martinez, the exercise controller, studied the team roster. Chen, you've been studying the tactical manuals. What's your assessment of the situation? Maya had indeed been studying, and she had been watching the failed attempts of the other teams carefully. Sir, both previous teams attempted direct frontal assaults and were detected early. The simulated hostiles have clear fields of fire covering all obvious approaches. But there's a drainage system that runs under the building. If we could access it from the northeast corner, we could potentially reach the basement level without detection. Martinez nodded approvingly. Interesting analysis. You have 30 minutes to execute. What followed was a textbook small unit operation that showcased not just Maya's tactical thinking but her growing leadership abilities. She coordinated the team's movement, assigned roles based on each member's strengths, and maintained constant communication throughout the mission. The drainage tunnel was exactly where Maya had predicted, and it provided concealed access to the building's lower level. From there, the team was able to identify the hostiles' positions and coordinate a simultaneous assault that neutralized all threats while protecting the simulated hostages. Mission complete, Maya reported to Captain Martinez as her team emerged from the building. All hostiles neutralized, all hostages secure, 0 friendly casualties. Martinez reviewed the exercise results with obvious satisfaction. Outstanding work, Chen. Your tactical analysis was spot on, and your execution was flawless. Where did you learn small unit tactics? From the Advanced Tactical Manual, sir. And I've been studying historical special operations missions during my free time. The successful completion of the hostage rescue exercise marked a turning point in how Maya was perceived by both instructors and fellow recruits. While open hostility hadn't disappeared entirely, there was a growing recognition that she possessed genuine military aptitude that went beyond just marksmanship. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez called Maya aside after the evening formation. "Chen, I've been watching your progress over the past 3 weeks. You've shown remarkable improvement in every area, but, more importantly, you've demonstrated the kind of tactical thinking and leadership potential that the military values highly." Maya felt her heart rate increase slightly. Recognition from Rodriguez meant more than any test score or exercise result. "I'm recommending you for advanced leadership assessment," Rodriguez continued. "If you pass, you'll be eligible for accelerated promotion and, potentially special assignment upon graduation." The recommendation for advanced leadership assessment was unprecedented for a recruit who had faced such initial skepticism. Maya understood that this was an opportunity that could transform not just her boot camp experience but her entire military career. That evening, as she prepared for the next day's challenges, Maya reflected on how much had changed since her arrival at Camp Ironstone. The scared, uncertain young woman who had been intimidated by the hostile environment was evolving into someone who could thrive under pressure and lead others in complex, dangerous situations. But she also understood that her success was generating new forms of resistance. As her achievements became harder to dismiss or explain away, some of her critics were becoming more vocal and more personal in their attacks. "She's trying too hard," she overheard Davis saying to a group of recruits during evening downtime. "Always studying, always practicing. It's not natural. Real soldiers don't need to read manuals all night to be good at their jobs." The criticism stung because it contained a grain of truth. Maya was working harder than most of her fellow recruits, spending her limited free time studying military doctrine and practicing skills that others seemed to pick up more naturally. But she had learned long ago that natural talent was less important than dedicated effort and systematic improvement. During night training exercises, Maya's analytical approach proved particularly valuable. While other recruits struggled to navigate in darkness using only basic compass and map skills, Maya had studied advanced land navigation techniques and understood how to use terrain features and celestial references to maintain accurate positioning. In a complex night movement exercise, Maya's team was tasked with reaching a specific grid coordinate 5 miles away while avoiding several enemy observation posts. Most teams attempted the most direct route and were quickly detected and eliminated from the exercise. Maya studied the topographical map carefully, identifying a longer but more concealed route that took advantage of natural terrain features and avoided all known enemy positions. Her navigation was precise enough that the team reached their objective without being detected, completing the mission faster than any other group despite taking an indirect approach. "How did you know about that route?" asked Jennifer Walsh, one of the few female recruits in Maya's training company and someone who had been less openly hostile than many of the male recruits. "I studied the topographical features during mission planning," Maya explained. "The direct routes were all through open terrain where we would be exposed. The creek bed provided concealment for most of the distance, and the ridgeline blocked observation from the enemy positions." Walsh nodded thoughtfully. She had been watching Maya's development with growing interest and was beginning to understand that Maya's success wasn't based on luck or political favoritism but on genuine military skill and extensive preparation. The advanced leadership assessment arrived sooner than Maya had expected. Captain Martinez conducted the evaluation personally, putting her through a series of increasingly complex scenarios that tested not just tactical knowledge but decision-making under pressure and the ability to inspire confidence in subordinates. The final scenario was particularly challenging. Maya was given command of a mixed team of recruits and instructors and tasked with planning and executing a simulated raid on a heavily defended position. The scenario was designed to be nearly impossible, testing how leaders performed when facing overwhelming odds. Maya studied the intelligence briefing carefully, identifying patterns in enemy patrol schedules and weaknesses in their defensive positions. She developed a plan that relied on precise timing, coordinated diversionary attacks, and exploitation of a brief window of vulnerability during shift changes. During the briefing to her team, Maya demonstrated the clear communication and confident leadership that the assessment was designed to evaluate. She assigned specific roles based on each team member's demonstrated strengths and established clear contingency plans for various possible complications. The raid itself was executed with military precision. Maya's timing was perfect, her team coordination was flawless, and her tactical decisions under pressure were sound. The mission was completed with complete surprise, achieving all objectives while sustaining 0 casualties. "Outstanding," Captain Martinez declared as he reviewed the results. "This was a graduate-level scenario, and you handled it better than most experienced officers. I'm recommending you for immediate promotion to squad leader and accelerated graduation." The promotion to squad leader meant that Maya would now have formal authority over some of the same recruits who had been questioning her presence at boot camp. It was a development that promised to create new tensions and challenges, but it also represented a definitive acknowledgement of her capabilities. Morrison's reaction to the news was particularly intense. "This is ridiculous," he declared during the evening formation after the promotion was announced. 3 weeks ago she couldn't finish a 5-mile run, and now she's supposed to be leading experienced recruits? This whole thing is a joke. But his complaints were beginning to fall on increasingly deaf ears. Maya's consistent performance and steady improvement had convinced most neutral observers that her promotion was based on merit rather than political considerations. Maya's promotion to squad leader brought with it responsibilities and challenges that went far beyond her previous role as just another recruit struggling to prove herself worthy of military service. As she pinned the temporary leadership insignia to her uniform, she understood that every decision she made would be scrutinized and every mistake would be magnified by those who still questioned her right to be at Camp Ironstone. Her new squad consisted of 8 recruits, including some of her most vocal critics. Morrison had been assigned to her squad, a development that Captain Martinez later admitted was intentional. "Leadership isn't about commanding people who already respect you," Martinez had explained during Maya's briefing. "It's about earning the trust and cooperation of those who doubt you." The first squad meeting was tense and awkward. Maya stood before recruits who just days earlier had been placing bets on when she would quit and go home. Now she was responsible for their training, their welfare, and ultimately their lives if they made it through boot camp and into active military service. "I know this situation is unusual," Maya began, her voice steady despite the hostile stares she was receiving. "Some of you have concerns about my qualifications and experience. I understand those concerns because I've shared them myself. But we have a job to do, and we're going to do it together." Morrison crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair, his body language clearly communicating disrespect and resistance. "With all due respect, Squad Leader Chen," he said, emphasizing her new title with obvious sarcasm, "what makes you think you can lead people who have more military experience and physical capability than you do?" It was a fair question, and Maya had been expecting it. "You're right that many of you have advantages I don't possess," she replied calmly. "You're stronger, faster, and more naturally suited to physical military tasks. But leadership isn't about being the best at everything. It's about understanding how to use everyone's strengths effectively and helping the team succeed collectively." Over the following days, Maya worked to demonstrate leadership through example rather than authority. She continued to push herself in physical training, steadily improving her performance while never asking her squad to do anything she wasn't willing to do herself. More importantly, she began to identify and leverage the individual strengths of each squad member. Tommy Chen, despite his earlier antagonism, proved to be exceptionally skilled at equipment maintenance and technical tasks. Maya made him the squad's designated equipment specialist, responsible for ensuring all weapons and gear were properly maintained and functional. Davis, with his football background, had natural leadership abilities and physical presence that other recruits respected. Maya appointed him as her assistant squad leader, giving him responsibility for organizing physical training sessions and maintaining squad discipline. Even Morrison, despite his continued resistance to her authority, possessed tactical instincts and aggressive determination that could be valuable in the right situations. Maya assigned him as point man for most training exercises, a position that utilized his strengths while keeping him focused on mission objectives rather than squad politics. The transformation wasn't immediate or complete. There were still moments of tension and resistance, particularly during the first week of Maya's leadership. Some squad members tested her authority by arriving late to formations or performing tasks with obvious reluctance. Maya addressed these challenges with a combination of firmness and fairness that gradually earned grudging respect. When Morrison showed up 5 minutes late to a morning formation, she assigned him extra duty without making it personal or vindictive. When Tommy questioned one of her tactical decisions during a training exercise, she explained her reasoning and asked for his input on potential improvements. The breakthrough came during a complex field training exercise that lasted 3 days and 2 nights. Maya's squad was tasked with conducting reconnaissance on enemy positions, gathering intelligence, and calling in simulated artillery strikes on high-value targets. The exercise took place in rough terrain during unseasonably cold weather, with persistent rain that made movement treacherous and visibility poor. Many squads struggled with the harsh conditions, and several had to be extracted early due to injuries or navigation errors that left them hopelessly lost. Maya's tactical planning was meticulous. She studied weather patterns and terrain features, identifying covered routes that would protect her squad from both enemy observation and the worst effects of the storm. She established communication protocols and contingency plans for various scenarios they might encounter. During the first night, Davis twisted his ankle badly while navigating a rocky creek bed in the darkness. The injury wasn't severe enough to require medical evacuation, but it significantly reduced his mobility and threatened to compromise the mission. Morrison immediately suggested that the injured man should be left in a secure position while the rest of the squad continued with the reconnaissance. "He's slowing us down," Morrison argued. "We can't complete the mission if we're dragging along someone who can barely walk." Maya considered the suggestion seriously. From a purely tactical standpoint, Morrison's recommendation made sense. But she had been studying military leadership principles, and she understood that how she handled this situation would define her relationship with the squad going forward. "We're not leaving anyone behind," she declared firmly. "Davis is part of this team, and we succeed or fail together." She reorganized the squad formation to accommodate Davis's reduced mobility, assigning Tommy to provide additional support while Morrison and another recruit took point positions. The modified approach was slower and more complex, but it allowed them to continue the mission without abandoning their injured teammate. The decision proved wise when they encountered an unexpected enemy patrol during the second day. Davis, despite his injury, spotted the approaching patrol before anyone else and alerted the squad to take cover. His warning prevented what could have been a mission-ending encounter. Maya's tactical leadership during the subsequent evasion was exceptional. She coordinated the squad's movement through difficult terrain while maintaining communication discipline and avoiding detection. When they finally reached their assigned observation position, they had successfully gathered all required intelligence while avoiding enemy contact. The final phase of the exercise required calling in artillery coordinates on simulated enemy positions. Maya had studied artillery procedures extensively and understood the critical importance of accuracy in target designation. A mistake in coordinates could result in friendly fire incidents or mission failure. She spent considerable time verifying her calculations and cross-checking map references before transmitting the fire mission. Her attention to detail paid off when the simulated artillery strikes achieved perfect accuracy, destroying all assigned targets without collateral damage. When Maya's squad returned to base camp after 3 days in the field, they had completed all mission objectives while maintaining 0 casualties. More importantly, they had functioned as a genuine team rather than a collection of individuals forced to work together. "Outstanding performance," Staff Sergeant Rodriguez declared during the post-exercise briefing. Squad leader Chen demonstrated exceptional tactical planning, adaptive leadership under pressure, and genuine concern for her subordinates' welfare. This is textbook small unit leadership. Even Morrison seemed impressed despite himself. "I'll admit," he said quietly to Maya as they cleaned their equipment, "I didn't think you could pull that off. The way you handled Davis's injury and still completed the mission, that was good leadership." The acknowledgement from Morrison was significant not just because of his previous hostility, but because other recruits respected his opinions and would be influenced by his changing attitude toward Maya's capabilities. Word of Maya's successful field exercise performance spread throughout the training company. Instructors who had initially been skeptical of her rapid promotion were beginning to take notice of her consistent achievements and developing leadership skills. Captain Martinez called Maya to his office for a private meeting following the field exercise. "Chen, I've been reviewing your file and your performance since arrival. Your progress has been remarkable, but, more importantly, you're demonstrating the kind of leadership potential that suggests you might be suitable for advanced military education." Maya felt her pulse quicken. Advanced military education typically led to officer candidacy and commissioning programs that could transform her entire career trajectory. "I'm recommending you for evaluation by the Officer Candidate Selection Board," Martinez continued. "If accepted, you would complete basic training and, then, proceed directly to officer candidate school. It's an opportunity that's offered to very few enlisted recruits." The news was overwhelming. Just a month earlier, Maya had been struggling to complete basic physical training while enduring constant criticism and skepticism from peers and instructors. Now she was being considered for officer candidacy, one of the military's most selective and prestigious programs. But the recommendation also brought new challenges and responsibilities. As word spread about her potential selection for officer training, the dynamics within her squad and the broader recruit population shifted again. Some recruits began treating her with increased deference, recognizing that she might soon outrank instructors who currently held authority over them. Others viewed her rapid advancement with increased suspicion and resentment, convinced that political factors were driving her success rather than genuine merit. "It's obvious what's happening here," she overheard one recruit saying to his friends during evening downtime. "They need diversity statistics for their officer corps, so they're fast-tracking anyone who fits the right demographics. Doesn't matter what her actual qualifications are." The comments stung because they touched on Maya's own occasional doubts about whether her success was entirely based on performance or whether other factors were influencing the decisions being made about her career. She had worked harder than almost anyone else in the company and had consistently exceeded expectations, but she couldn't completely dismiss the possibility that her minority status and gender were playing a role in the opportunities being offered to her. During a particularly challenging combat simulation exercise, Maya's squad was assigned to assault a heavily fortified position while under intense simulated enemy fire. The scenario was designed to test leadership under extreme stress and the ability to make critical decisions while managing casualties and equipment failures. Maya's tactical plan was sound, but the exercise quickly became chaotic as simulated casualties mounted and communication equipment began malfunctioning. Several squad members were designated as wounded, including Morrison, who was assigned a simulated leg wound that prevented him from continuing the assault. Under enormous pressure to complete the mission quickly, Maya was faced with the same type of decision that had tested her during the field exercise. She could leave the wounded behind and push forward with remaining personnel, or she could adapt her tactics to accommodate the casualties while still achieving mission objectives. Once again, Maya chose to adapt rather than abandon her people. She reorganized the assault force, assigned personnel to care for the wounded, and modified her approach to the objective. The solution was more complex and time-consuming, but it reflected the military values of never leaving anyone behind. The modified assault was successful, achieving all tactical objectives while properly caring for casualties. When exercise evaluators reviewed the results, they noted that Maya's decision-making under pressure demonstrated the kind of moral courage and tactical flexibility that characterized the best military leaders. "Most leaders would have chosen the easier path," noted Major Thompson, the senior exercise evaluator. "Squad leader Chen consistently chooses to do the right thing even when it makes her job more difficult. That's the mark of someone who understands that leadership is about serving others, not just achieving objectives." As her bootcamp experience neared its conclusion, Maya had transformed from an uncertain recruit struggling to meet basic standards into a confident leader who consistently exceeded expectations in every area of military training. Her marksmanship scores remained at expert level, her physical fitness had improved dramatically, and her tactical knowledge rivaled that of many experienced soldiers. More importantly, she had earned the genuine respect of most of her fellow recruits and instructors. Even those who had initially opposed her presence were forced to acknowledge that her achievements were based on merit rather than favoritism or lowered standards. The Officer Candidate Selection Board interview was scheduled for Maya's final week of basic training. The board consisted of senior officers from various military specialties, and their evaluation would determine whether she would be accepted into one of the military's most competitive programs. Maya prepared for the interview with characteristic thoroughness, studying military history, current events, and leadership philosophy. She understood that the board would be looking not just at her boot camp performance but at her potential to serve as a commissioned officer responsible for the lives and welfare of soldiers under her command. The interview itself was intensive and comprehensive. Board members questioned her about tactical scenarios, ethical dilemmas, and her understanding of military values and traditions. They probed her motivations for military service and her long-term career aspirations. Squad Leader Chen asked Colonel Harrison, the board president, "You've achieved remarkable success during basic training, but officer candidate school will present even greater challenges. What makes you believe you're ready for that level of responsibility?" Maya considered the question carefully before responding. "Sir, I've learned that leadership isn't about being the strongest or the fastest or even the smartest person in the room. It's about understanding how to bring out the best in others and making decisions that serve the mission and the people you're responsible for. I believe my experiences here have taught me those lessons, but I also understand that learning to lead is a lifelong process." The board was clearly impressed with both her performance record and her thoughtful approach to leadership challenges. After deliberating for what seemed like hours, Colonel Harrison delivered their decision. "Squad Leader Chen, the board unanimously recommends you for acceptance into officer candidate school. Your performance during basic training has been exceptional, and we believe you have the potential to serve with distinction as a commissioned officer." Maya felt a surge of pride and accomplishment unlike anything she had ever experienced. The journey from ridiculed outsider to respected leader had been difficult and sometimes painful, but it had forged her into someone capable of succeeding in the most demanding military environments. The final week of basic training at Camp Ironstone brought an unexpected visitor who would change everything Maya thought she knew about her own story. General Patricia Blackwood, a 3-star general and one of the highest-ranking women in the United States military, arrived for what was officially described as a routine inspection of training facilities. Maya was conducting a squad training session on advanced tactical movements when she noticed an unusual amount of activity around the base headquarters building. Military vehicles with flag officers' markings had arrived, and senior staff were moving with the purposeful urgency that indicated very important visitors were present. "Attention on deck," called Staff Sergeant Rodriguez as a group of senior officers approached the training area where Maya's squad was practicing small unit tactics. Among them was a woman whose bearing and uniform decorations immediately identified her as someone of exceptional rank and authority. General Blackwood was a formidable presence, standing tall in her perfectly pressed uniform adorned with ribbons representing decades of distinguished service. Her reputation preceded her. She was known throughout the military as a brilliant strategist, an uncompromising leader, and someone who had broken numerous barriers for women in combat roles. As the general's party observed the training exercise, Maya noticed that Blackwood's attention seemed focused specifically on her squad's performance. The general watched intently as Maya coordinated her team's movement through a complex urban warfare simulation, noting her tactical decisions and leadership style. "Squad Leader Chen," called Captain Martinez, "please report to the general for a briefing on today's exercise." Maya approached the group of senior officers with military bearing, though her heart was racing. Being singled out for attention by a 3-star general was not something that happened to basic training recruits under normal circumstances. "Squad Leader Chen," General Blackwood said, her voice carrying authority that came from years of commanding respect in predominantly male military environments, "I've been reviewing your training record. Your progress has been remarkable, particularly given your background. Tell me about your tactical approach to today's exercise." Maya provided a concise briefing on her squad's mission plan, explaining her reasoning for specific tactical decisions and how she had adapted to changing conditions during the simulation. Throughout her presentation, she noticed that General Blackwood was studying her with an intensity that seemed to go beyond professional interest. "Outstanding analysis," the general said when Maya concluded her briefing. "Your tactical thinking shows sophistication that I would expect from much more experienced leaders." She paused, then added quietly, "Walk with me, squad leader. I'd like to speak with you privately." As they moved away from the group of officers, General Blackwood's demeanor shifted subtly. The formal military bearing remained, but there was something more personal in her manner as she began to speak. "Chen, I need to ask you some personal questions, and I want you to answer honestly. What do you know about your family background, particularly your father's military service?" The question caught Maya off guard. She had always known that her father had served briefly in the military before immigrating to the United States, but the details had always been vague. Family discussions about the past typically focused on their success in building a new life in America rather than what they had left behind. "Very little, ma'am," Maya replied honestly. "My father rarely discusses his time in military service. I know he was in the Chinese military for a short period, but he's always said it wasn't important and that our life began when we came to America." General Blackwood nodded slowly, as if Maya's answer confirmed something she had been expecting. "Chen, what I'm about to tell you may come as a shock. Your father's name is Colonel David Chen, formerly of the People's Liberation Army Special Operations Forces. He defected to the United States 25 years ago, bringing with him intelligence that was crucial to American national security." Maya felt the ground seem to shift beneath her feet. The father she knew was a quiet, hard-working man who ran a small restaurant and rarely spoke about his past. The idea that he had been a high-ranking military officer and defector was so far from her understanding of him that she initially wondered if the general had confused her with someone else. "Ma'am, I think there might be some mistake," Maya said carefully. "My father is a restaurant owner. He's never mentioned being a colonel or defecting or anything like military intelligence." "There's no mistake," General Blackwood replied firmly. "David Chen was one of the most effective special operations officers in the PLA before he defected. The intelligence he provided when he came to America prevented several potential military conflicts and saved countless lives. His identity was classified at the highest levels of government for his protection and yours." The revelation recontextualized everything Maya thought she knew about her family's history. Her father's occasional moments of tactical awareness, his insistence on physical fitness and discipline, his quiet confidence in crisis situations, details that had seemed like personality quirks now made perfect sense. "Why are you telling me this now?" Maya asked, struggling to process the implications of what she was learning. "Because your performance here has attracted attention from people who recognize the family name," General Blackwood explained. "Your tactical instincts, your leadership abilities, your analytical approach to military problems, these aren't coincidences. You inherited these capabilities from a father who was one of the most gifted military minds of his generation." Maya's mind raced as she considered this new information. Her rapid success at Bootcamp, which she had attributed to hard work and determination, might have been enhanced by genetic and environmental factors she hadn't understood. Her father's influence on her development had been subtle but profound. "Ma'am, does this mean my acceptance into officer candidate school?" Maya began, then stopped, afraid to complete the question. "Your achievements are entirely your own," General Blackwood said firmly. "Your father's background didn't influence any decisions about your career. In fact, most people involved in those decisions didn't know about the connection. But, now that your potential has been demonstrated, there are opportunities available that go far beyond standard officer candidacy." Over the next hour, General Blackwood outlined possibilities that Maya had never imagined. Special Forces training, intelligence operations, advanced strategic planning positions, career paths that were typically reserved for officers with years of experience and proven track records. "The military has been watching your family for over 2 decades, the general explained. Not for security reasons, but because we recognized that David Chen's children might inherit his exceptional abilities. Your success here confirms what we hoped might be possible." Maya struggled to absorb the magnitude of what she was learning. Her entire understanding of her identity and her place in the world had been transformed in the space of a single conversation. The immigrant restaurant owner's daughter had become the daughter of a decorated Special Forces colonel whose defection had influenced international relations. "What does this mean for my future?" Maya asked. "What's expected of me?" "Nothing is expected of you beyond what you choose for yourself," General Blackwood replied. But, if you're interested, there are opportunities to serve your country in ways that few people ever have the chance to do. Your combination of inherited tactical instincts and demonstrated leadership ability makes you potentially valuable in roles that require exceptional capability. That evening, Maya was granted special permission to make a private phone call to her father. The conversation that followed was unlike any they had ever shared. "Bah," Maya said, using the Chinese term for father that she hadn't used since childhood, "I need to know about your military service." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone before her father responded. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight and authority that Maya had never heard before. "Meili," he said, using her Chinese name, "I had hoped this conversation would never be necessary. I wanted to leave that life behind completely when we came to America." Over the next hour, David Chen told his daughter the truth about his past. He had been a rising star in the PLA Special Forces, marked for high command and groomed for strategic leadership. But, witnessing corruption and human rights abuses had gradually turned him against the system he had sworn to serve. "I realized that my skills and knowledge could be used to serve a better purpose," he explained. "Defecting to America wasn't just about seeking a better life for our family. It was about using what I knew to prevent conflicts that could have cost thousands of lives." He described the intelligence he had provided about military capabilities, strategic plans, and potential flashpoints that American policymakers had used to diffuse tensions and prevent military confrontations. His information had been crucial in several diplomatic successes that had never been publicly acknowledged. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Maya asked. "Why let me think you were just a restaurant owner?" "Because I wanted you to choose your own path," her father replied. "I didn't want you to feel burdened by my past or obligated to follow in my footsteps. Your success at Bootcamp proves that you have inherited the abilities, but you've developed them through your own effort and determination." The conversation with her father helped Maya understand that her military aptitude wasn't coincidental, but it also confirmed that her achievements were genuinely her own. The tactical instincts and leadership abilities might have been inherited, but she had developed them through dedicated study and practice. General Blackwood remained at Camp Ironstone for 2 additional days, during which Maya was given unprecedented access to discuss her future options. The general outlined several possible career paths, each offering opportunities for service at the highest levels of military and intelligence operations. "The choice is entirely yours," Blackwood emphasized during their final meeting. "You can proceed with standard officer candidacy and have a distinguished conventional military career. Or you can consider specialized training that would prepare you for roles that require exceptional capability and absolute discretion." Maya requested time to consider her options, but she understood that this was a decision that would shape not just her military career but her entire life's direction. The shy, uncertain recruit who had arrived at Camp Ironstone had evolved into someone capable of serving at the highest levels of national security. On graduation day, as Maya stood in formation with her fellow recruits, she reflected on the incredible journey she had completed. From being mocked and dismissed as physically inadequate and unsuited for military service, she had become one of the top performers in her training class and earned opportunities that few soldiers ever received. Morrison approached her after the ceremony, extending his hand in a gesture of genuine respect. "Chen, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you from the beginning. You've shown more courage and leadership than anyone I've ever served with." The acknowledgement from Morrison was meaningful because it represented the broader transformation in how she was perceived by her peers. The recruit who had been seen as a diversity quota fulfillment had proven herself as a legitimate military leader through consistent performance and unwavering determination. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez delivered her final evaluation with obvious pride. "Squad Leader Chen, you've demonstrated that true military capability isn't about size or strength or background. It's about character, determination, and the ability to inspire others to achieve more than they thought possible." As Maya prepared to leave Camp Ironstone for officer candidate school, she carried with her not just the knowledge of her father's hidden past but a deep understanding of her own capabilities and potential. The mocking and skepticism she had endured had forged her into someone stronger and more resilient than she could have become without those challenges. General Blackwood's final words to her had been both challenging and inspiring. You have the potential to serve your country in ways that could influence history. The question isn't whether you're capable, your performance here has answered that definitively. The question is whether you're willing to accept the responsibility that comes with exceptional ability. Maya's story at boot camp had begun with others questioning whether she belonged there. It ended with her questioning not whether she belonged, but how she could best use her newfound understanding of her capabilities and heritage to serve something larger than herself. The general's discovery of her true identity had revealed not just who she was, but who she could become. The transformation from ridiculed outsider to respected leader was complete, but Maya understood that it was just the beginning of a journey that would test her abilities in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Her father's legacy had given her a foundation, but everything she built upon it would be entirely her own achievement.